Right now, there are tiny coins sitting in people's pockets, wallets, and old jars. Coins so small and so ordinary that nobody ever stops to look at them twice. Dimes, just 10 cents. Most people think they're almost worthless. But what if that belief is completely wrong? What if I told you that some of these exact same dimes, the ones people spend every single day without thinking, have secretly sold for thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars? Tiny silver coin once bought a meal, now it can buy a mansion. Discover the forgotten fortune behind the rare 1916 one dime that changed American coin history forever. The year is 1916, and America is standing on the edge of great transformation as the country continues to grow and evolve. So too does its currency, and the coins minted in this era become powerful symbols of national identity and pride. Among them is the 1916 one dime, a coin that appears small and unassuming at first glance, but carries with it a story of incredible value, historical significance, artistic excellence, and national change. To truly understand the value and legacy of the 1916 one dime, we must go back to the early 20th century, a time when the United States was emerging as a global power, when President Woodrow Wilson was leading the nation, and when the economy, industry, and infrastructure were booming. The United States Mint was under pressure to modernize coinage and introduce designs that reflected the new century. The designs of Charles Barber, the chief engraver of the U.S. Mint, had dominated the coinage of the late 1800s and early 1900s, including the Barber dime, but by 1915 there was a clear desire for something fresh, something that symbolized liberty, not just in name, but in imagery. This is where Adolf A. Weinman enters the picture, a gifted sculptor and engraver. He was chosen to design the new dime in a contest sponsored by the Commission of Fine Arts. Weinman delivered a masterpiece that would soon become known as the Mercury dime, although the coin officially represented liberty, wearing a winged cap to symbolize freedom of thought. The resemblance to the Roman god Mercury gave the coin its popular nickname in 1916. The first year of the Mercury dime production, the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints began striking these coins. Each mint left its mark in a subtle way, with a tiny letter representing its city: P for Philadelphia, D for Denver, and S for San Francisco. But it was the 1916 D Mercury dime that would rise above all others to become one of the most valuable and sought-after coins in American numismatic history. The Denver Mint produced only 26,000 of these dimes, a shockingly low number, in contrast. The Philadelphia Mint struck more than 22 million, and the San Francisco Mint produced over 10 million. This rarity made the 1916 D dime an instant target for collectors, and its value soared as demand outpaced supply. Even in circulated condition, a genuine 1916 D Mercury dime can be worth thousands of dollars, and in uncirculated mint state, it can reach into the tens or even hundreds of thousands. Collectors often search for that tiny D mint mark on the reverse of the coin just to verify its origin and authenticity. Many fakes exist, making authentication crucial, but what makes this coin so desirable goes beyond rarity. It is also about the artistry and symbolism. The obverse of the coin features liberty in a winged cap, representing freedom of thought, and the reverse shows a fasces and olive branch, symbols of unity, strength, and peace. Powerful messages in an era just before the United States would enter World War I. The 1916 one dime, especially the Denver Mint version, marks a pivotal shift in the philosophy of American coin design. It shows a move toward symbolism, toward beauty, and toward a message of democratic ideals and strength through unity. This coin was not just for spending, it was meant to represent American values every time it passed. From hand to hand, it reminded citizens of what they stood for and what the country aimed to become. During the early years of the Mercury dime, the coin circulated widely and was used for daily transactions. It bought food, paid for bus rides, helped with savings, and was even used in vending machines over time as the design became more familiar, and as collectors realized the rarity of the 1916 D version. It was pulled from circulation and stored away in collections, museums, and safes around the world. The historical context of the 1916 dime is also vital. This was a period of global upheaval with World War I raging in Europe and tensions rising in the United States as well. It was a time of suffragette marches, labor strikes, and rapid industrialization. The dime minted in 1916 would pass through the hands of Americans, witnessing the First War, the Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression, and the Second World War. Its legacy continued through all those moments as a silent witness to the American story. Through the decades, the Mercury dime series ran from 1916 to 1945, when it was replaced by the Roosevelt dime following the death of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, yet none of the subsequent designs would carry quite the same mystique and collector demand as the 1916 D dime, too. This day, coin dealers, auction houses, and collectors all seek out this legendary coin. The story of its low mintage, the artistry of Weinman, the symbolism of its design, and the passion it ignites in collectors make it one of the most iconic dimes ever struck in United States history, and it is not just the 1916 D that matters. Even the 1916 S and 1916 P have historical and numismatic value. Especially in high grades, when preserved carefully, these coins tell their own. Unique stories of minting distribution and use in different parts of the country, advanced collectors know that full band details on the reverse of the Mercury dime can dramatically increase value. The full bands are horizontal lines on the fasces and show how well the coin was struck. This detail adds a layer of grading complexity and value enhancement that makes hunting for the perfect 1916 dime all the more thrilling. The Mercury dime also inspired future coin designers and left a legacy of artistic excellence within the U.S. Mint. The impact of Weinman design is felt even today, as his initials AW can be seen on modern coins like the American Silver Eagle. The 1916 one dime serves as a perfect example of how a small object can carry immense history value and emotion. It represents craftsmanship, rarity, symbolism, patriotism, and the journey of a growing nation. It is a treasure of silver and a symbol of identity from the Denver Mint. To collectors' hands, from history books to auction catalogs, this coin lives on. If you ever come across an old dime, check the date and flip it over to look for that tiny D, because you may just be holding one of the most legendary and valuable coins in American history. And if that coin happens to be uncirculated with full bands and confirmed authenticity, you are not just looking at 10 cents. You are looking at a piece of national heritage worth more than gold in the world of coin collecting. The 1916 one dime is not just a coin, it is a legend. And this legend continues to inspire collectors, historians, and investors from generation to generation. In the world of American numismatics, there are coins that are instantly recognizable for their designs, their symbolism, and their connection to the everyday lives of millions of people. And among those coins is the Roosevelt dime, which in 1971 entered yet another chapter in its long journey of circulation, minting, and collecting. When you hold a 1971 dime, you are not just holding 10 cents of American currency. You are holding a piece of United States history that reflects the economic conditions, the political climate, the minting technology, and the cultural values of its time. The 1971 dime carries on the design that was first introduced in 1946, shortly after the death of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, whose leadership during the Great Depression and World War II had made him one of the most influential presidents in American history. The dime became the coin chosen to honor him, not only because of his legacy as a leader, but also because of his association with the March of Dimes campaign, which sought to eradicate polio, a disease that Roosevelt himself struggled with throughout much of his life. The coin was designed by John R. Sinek, the chief engraver of the United States Mint, and the obverse features the left-facing profile portrait of Roosevelt, while the reverse presents a torch symbolizing liberty flanked by an olive branch for peace and an oak branch for strength. This simple yet meaningful design carried forward into 1971 with no major changes, but every year of production has its own story, and the 1971 dime is no exception. To understand the 1971 Roosevelt dime, one must consider the broader historical and economic background of the United States during that year. The early 1970s were a time of significant change in the nation. The Vietnam War was ongoing. President Richard Nixon was in office, and in August 1971, Nixon shocked the world by taking the United States off the gold standard, ending the direct convertibility of the dollar to gold. This was known as the Nixon shock, and it set in motion a new era of American and global finance. While the dime itself was not directly tied to gold, its production and circulation existed within this larger framework of economic upheaval. Inflationary pressures and shifting monetary policies. In 1971, the dime was struck at three different mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with the Philadelphia Mint producing coins without a mint mark, the Denver Mint producing coins with the D Mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint producing proof coins with the S Mint mark. It is important to remember that the composition of the dime had already changed a few years earlier in 1965 as a result of the Coinage Act, which eliminated silver from the dime and quarter, replacing it with a clad composition consisting of an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This was done because the rising price of silver had made it impractical for the government to continue minting circulating silver dimes. By 1971, collectors were already well aware that silver dimes from 1964 and earlier had intrinsic value above their face value due to their precious metal content. But the clad dimes, such as those produced in 1971, carried no intrinsic silver and instead represented a shift to a more modern, cost-effective coinage system. Still, the 1971 dime holds significance for collectors because of its varieties, errors, and its role in the continuity of American coinage. For example, minting technology in the early 1970s was not as advanced as it is today, and quality control issues sometimes resulted in error coins. These can include off-center strikes, double strikes, die cracks, filled dies, and weak strikes. In some cases, proof coins from the San Francisco Mint show variations in cameo contrast or even frosting levels, which can affect their desirability among collectors. Another point of interest lies in the fact that while the clad composition was intended to produce durable, long-lasting coins, the actual wear on circulation pieces from the early 1970s demonstrates how the nickel cladding could lose luster over time. Collectors often find that coins from 1971 in higher grades with full bands on the torch of the reverse are much scarcer than circulated examples. The full bands designation refers to the horizontal bands on the torch being fully struck and separated, which is a hallmark of quality, striking, and often commands a premium in the marketplace. When we examine the mintage numbers, we find that the Philadelphia Mint struck over 316 million dimes in 1971, the Denver Mint produced over 754 million, and the San Francisco Mint issued over 3 million proof coins. These figures reveal that the 1971 dime was produced in massive quantities, ensuring its circulation across the nation and embedding it deeply into the pockets, purses, and cash registers of everyday Americans. Yet, despite the huge mintages, truly high-grade examples remain a challenge for collectors because coins struck for circulation were not intended to be preserved in pristine condition. They were handled, they were spent, and they were exposed to the wear and tear of commerce, making mint-state examples above grade MS-66 or higher relatively rare and therefore collectible. The San Francisco proof issues stand out for their mirror-like surfaces and sharp details, but they too can vary in quality, with some coins showing hazing or spotting, while others achieve deep cameo designations, which are highly prized. When evaluating the 1971 dime in terms of value, one must consider condition rarity and collector demand. A worn circulation dime from 1971 is typically worth only its face value of 10 cents. However, coins in uncirculated grades can command higher premiums, with the most exceptional examples certified by grading services, selling for much more proof coins, especially those with deep cameo designations are also valued highly by collectors beyond the physical attributes of the coin. The 1971 dime is also a reflection of American life in that era. It was the coin handed to children for candy at the corner store. It was the dime dropped into a payphone to make an urgent call. It was the coin used in vending machines, jukeboxes, and laundromats. It was a symbol of everyday commerce at a time when 10 cents could still buy something meaningful in American society. The Roosevelt dime was and remains the smallest denomination coin in terms of physical size still in circulation today, yet it has carried enormous symbolic weight over the decades, and the 1971 issue is part of that continuum. It reminds us of the transition from silver to clad coinage. It reflects the economic turbulence of the early 1970s. It offers numismatists opportunities for study in varieties, grades, and minting quality, and it connects us to the legacy of Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose visage still graces the dime nearly 8 decades after it was first struck. To collect a 1971 dime is to collect not just a coin but a story, a piece of history minted in an era of change, uncertainty, and resilience. It is a reminder that even the smallest denominations in our coinage carry weight far beyond their size, representing the people who used them, the economy that demanded them, and the nation that issued them. In the world of American coinage, few pieces seem as overlooked as the Roosevelt dime of 1987, yet this small, silver-colored coin carries within its surface a story that stretches across more than 4 decades of American history, monetary policy, artistry, and legacy. By the time the 1987 dime was minted, the Roosevelt series had already been circulating for over 40 years, having been introduced in 1946 as a national tribute to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, who had passed away in April of 1945. Roosevelt was not only remembered as the leader who guided America through the Great Depression and the Second World War, but also as a man who struggled with polio, which left him paralyzed from the waist down. His battle with this disease became a rallying point for the March of Dimes campaign, a grassroots fundraising effort that helped support research into the prevention and treatment of polio. Thus, when the United States Mint sought to honor Roosevelt, it was only natural that his portrait should grace the dime, tying together his legacy with the coin most associated with the fight against the illness that had defined much of his personal life and the public campaign that united millions of Americans. By the year 1987, the dime had already gone through significant transformations, no longer struck in silver, as it was during its early years, but instead composed of a copper-nickel-clad design that reflected the realities of modern American coinage. The Coinage Act of 1965 had brought sweeping changes to the metallic composition of circulating coins, eliminating silver from the dime and the quarter in response to the rising cost of silver bullion and the increasing demand for coinage in commerce. By 1987, the American public had long since adjusted to this shift, but collectors still viewed each year of production through the lens of rarity, minting errors, design continuity, and the broader historical context. Surrounding the coins, the 1987 dime was struck at multiple facilities, primarily the Philadelphia Mint, which bore no mint mark at the time, and the Denver Mint, which produced coins with the familiar D mint mark, as well as the San Francisco Mint, which struck proof issues with the S mint mark, meant primarily for collectors. When we examine the 1987 dime, we see the enduring design of John R. Sinek, the chief engraver of the United States Mint, who had been tasked with preparing the Roosevelt portrait. In the immediate aftermath of the president's passing, Sinek's design features a left-facing profile of Roosevelt. On the obverse, his features sharp and dignified, accompanied by the inscriptions, "Liberty in God, we trust the year of mintage," and the small JS initials of the designer below the truncation of the bust on the reverse. The design carries the torch of liberty flanked by an olive branch representing peace and an oak branch representing strength, these symbols together conveyed the values of freedom, resilience, and unity that Roosevelt himself had come to embody during his presidency. What makes the 1987 dime particularly fascinating is not necessarily its face value or its composition, but rather its place in the continuum of American coinage history. For collectors, the 1987 dime is often regarded as a common issue with high mintage figures, yet even within such commonality, there exists nuance that transforms an ordinary coin into an object of fascination: minting. Varieties such as off-center strikes, die cracks doubled. Dies and weak strikes are all phenomena that make certain 1987 dimes far more desirable to collectors than others in the world of numismatics. Rarity is not always about the total number struck, but about the survival of particular anomalies and the condition of coins that remain in pristine states. Coins graded at the highest levels of mint state by organizations such as PCGS and NGC can command far greater attention and market value than their worn, circulated counterparts. The late 1980s also marked an important time in American coin production. The economic conditions of the United States were shifting, with inflation concerns, the aftermath of the oil crises of the 1970s, still lingering, and changes in global economic policies that affected trade and commerce. Coins like the 1987 dime passed through countless hands each day. In an era before the widespread use of digital payments, the dime still had purchasing power, sufficient for vending machines, payphones, and small transactions, making it an indispensable part of daily life in American society. To hold a dime in 1987 was to hold a piece of currency that remained deeply functional, bridging the gap between necessity and symbolism. At the same time, collectors were beginning to take greater notice of modern coinage as more Americans turned their attention to assembling complete date and mint mark sets. The Roosevelt dime, though long overshadowed by flashier coins like the Lincoln cent or the Washington quarter, started gaining attention from a new generation of numismatists who understood that even the so-called common coins of today could become rarities. Tomorrow, the proof sets of 1987 struck at the San Francisco Mint are particularly prized not for their scarcity, but for their sharp mirrored fields, frosted devices, and the artistry that they represent. For many coin enthusiasts, owning a 1987 S-proof dime is less about financial investment and more about preserving a moment in time when craftsmanship and modern minting technology intersected to produce coins of remarkable beauty. The deeper we dive into the history of the 1987 dime, the more we realize that each detail is connected to larger themes of American history: the story of Roosevelt and his enduring legacy, the transformation of coinage from silver to clad metal, the technological progress of the United States Mint, and the role of coinage as both currency and cultural artifact. All of these threads intertwine to make even a seemingly ordinary dime into a piece of living history. Whether found in pocket change in a collector's album or in a professional grading slab, the 1987 dime reminds us that coins are never just pieces of metal. They are silent witnesses to the passage of time, to the shifting of economies, to the honoring of leaders, and to the lives of ordinary people who used them. And so, when we look at the 1987 Roosevelt dime, we are not simply looking at a coin worth 10 cents in face value, but rather at an artifact that speaks to continuity, resilience, and memory. It speaks to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's fight against polio. It speaks to America's adaptation to economic change. It speaks to the artistry of John Sinek and the work of countless mint employees who produced billions of coins to sustain commerce. It speaks to the collectors who search tirelessly for that flawless gem or rare variety. It speaks to the broader American story itself, a story that continues to evolve with each passing year and with each coin that slips unnoticed into a pocket or is carefully set aside as part of a collection. In the vast history of American coinage, few coins capture both the ordinary rhythm of daily life and the extraordinary story of a nation's values as the Roosevelt dime. And when we look at the year 1969, we are not just looking at a small silver, colored piece of metal, but at a historical artifact that connects politics, economy, design, artistry, and the American spirit of resilience. The 1969 dime stands as a symbol of change in the United States, for this was a nation transitioning from the turbulence of the 1960s into the modern economic world, and every single dime minted in this year carries the quiet echoes of that transformation. To truly understand the 1969 dime, we must travel back to the origins of the Roosevelt dime itself. First introduced in 1946, only a year after the passing of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, who guided America through both the Great Depression and World War II, the coin was meant as a permanent tribute to his leadership and, more importantly, to his role in the March of Dimes, a grassroots campaign to fight polio, which had afflicted millions, including Roosevelt himself. It was therefore fitting that his portrait would grace the 10-cent piece forever, linking his memory to the cause of public health and civic duty. The dime's designer was John R. Sinek, chief engraver of the United States Mint, and he created a left-facing portrait of Roosevelt with the inscriptions, "Liberty and in God we trust," accompanied by the date and mint mark on the obverse, while the reverse featured a torch flanked by an olive branch symbolizing peace and an oak branch symbolizing strength with the motto, E pluribus unum. Binding the imagery together, this design, launched in 1946, became instantly recognizable, and it remains in circulation today, which makes the 1969 dime not just a coin but part of an unbroken line of history stretching from the mid-20th century to the present. Now the context of 1969 is crucial, because by this year, the United States had already abandoned silver coinage in most denominations. The Coinage Act of 1965 had removed silver from the dime, and the quarter replacing it with a clad composition of outer layers of copper, nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This change was driven by rising silver prices and the need to keep coins in circulation, because people were hoarding the older 90% silver issues. So the 1969 dime is a copper nickel-clad coin with a weight of 27 grams, and a diameter of 17.91 millimeters, struck in the same specifications still used today. However, although it may appear common, its story is deeply tied to America's shifting economy, the end of silver coinage, inflationary pressures, and the growing role of coins as symbols rather than intrinsic stores of value. The United States Mint struck the 1969 dime at three major facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Philadelphia produced coins without a mint mark. Denver used the D mark, and San Francisco struck coins with the S mark, many of which were specially prepared as proof coins for collectors in official proof sets. The Philadelphia mintage exceeded 145 million coins, while Denver produced over 563 million, making it the largest contributor, and San Francisco struck a little more than 9 million proof coins. Each of these mints contributed to a national coinage system designed to keep commerce flowing during a time of rapid social and technological change. What makes the 1969 dime especially intriguing to numismatists is the attention to varieties and errors which often transform an everyday coin into a rare collectible. Although the clad composition meant these coins were not valued for their metal content, certain error coins became highly desirable among collectors'. Examples include off-center strikes, double strikes, misaligned dies, and full band details on the reverse torch, which indicate a strong strike and careful preservation. The proof dimes struck at San Francisco are particularly studied for cameo and deep cameo, contrast with frosted devices against mirror fields, creating visually stunning examples for advanced collections. But beyond its physical details, the 1969 dime must be seen in its historical setting. The year 1969 was one of both turbulence and triumph for America. The nation watched as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon while simultaneously facing deep divisions over the Vietnam War. Civil rights struggles and cultural upheaval coins from this period represent the spending habits of everyday Americans at the gas station, the grocery store, or the movie theater, and every dime circulated through countless hands carried with it the weight of the nation's identity. Collectors today study the 1969 dime, not only for its varieties but also for its place in the timeline of Roosevelt dimes. It belongs to the early clad era when the transition away from silver was still fresh in the public's memory, and many Americans lamented the loss of intrinsic value in their coins. Yet despite the criticisms the Roosevelt dime endured without a major redesign proving that the portrait of FDR had become timeless and unassailable, this coin in many ways stabilized the 10-cent denomination and helped solidify the mint's strategy of cost-effective clad coinage. Over the decades, the 1969 dime has also become a teaching tool for students of American history. It tells us about the legacy of Franklin Roosevelt, the ingenuity of coin design, the pressures of monetary policy, and the resilience of a nation that was reshaping its identity for the modern age. While at first glance it may look like a common dime found in pocket change, its story reveals layers of meaning that connect to politics, economics, and even the aspirations of space exploration. In the year it was struck, to hold a 1969 dime today is to hold a fragment of that pivotal year when America was balancing turmoil at home with triumphs abroad. From a numismatic standpoint, the coin is still accessible to collectors, and yet high-grade examples certified by leading grading services can fetch strong prices, especially in mint state with full torch details or in deep cameo-proof condition. These coins bridge the gap between affordability and historical significance, which makes them appealing for beginners and advanced collectors alike. And they remind us that value in coin collecting is not only measured in dollars, but also in the richness of the story each coin tells. Thus, the 1969 dime is more than a piece of currency. It is a miniature monument to Franklin Roosevelt, a reflection of America's economic strategy in the face of changing silver markets, and a silent witness to the sweeping events of 1969, from the lunar landing to the cultural revolutions that reshaped society. For a YouTube channel dedicated to rare American coins, it offers the perfect subject because it allows viewers to explore not just a coin, but an entire era encapsulated in copper nickel.